Live service games are everywhere these days, and even if you think you don't know what a live service game is, or you think you don't know of any live service games, I guarantee you you're wrong. I guarantee you know like a million live service games. Essentially, a live service game is a game where the goal is to keep players playing as long and as much as possible, and this is usually accompanied by frequent updates, frequent content drops. Usually, but not always, these are multiplayer games that are supported by microtransactions, an in-game store. So very well-known live service games are like Fortnite, Apex, Rocket League, FIFA, RuneScape, World of Warcraft, so much more. Way back in the day, in the early 2000s, I believe MMOs were really the thing that started it all. And even then, it's just so much different than what it is now. Back then, like for RuneScape, I remember membership was $5 a month, and that was basically it. Whereas nowadays, live service games not only try to keep you online and playing as much as possible, but they try to keep you buying their content as much, as frequently as possible. Usually these games are free, but they tempt you all the time with, content that you can pay for. While live service games are absolutely everywhere, they're more prevalent now than they ever have been. I made a video about 2 months ago saying that there was a recent study that showed that 95% of game studios were currently developing a live service game, at least one live service game. And like I kind of said earlier, if you just think about what are the most popular video games in the world today, like all of them you're going to think of, or almost all of them, are live service games. Yeah, it's not very often we get like a Baldur's Gate 3 or an Elden Ring, games that really take off, really pop off, and they're actually not a live service game. Nowadays, it would seem that game studios feel that the only way they will truly find success, and they'll truly get, a banger of a video game that will just really pop off and make them a ton of money, is through live service games. But there has been a recent survey that basically interviewed different game developers, and it came to a very interesting conclusion. Way more than half, almost specifically 70% of game developers are unsure about the sustainability of live service games. They're very nervous about them. Yeah, more than half of game developers feel that live service games are oftentimes not worth the risk. This was a survey done by the Game Developer Collective. They interviewed 600 game developers over the past 2 months, and the main highlight here is that they found that 39% of developers expressed at least some worries about live service games, and 31% indicated they had significant worries about them, which means only 30%, it says 29, but that doesn't add up to 100%, so I'm just going to say 30%. 30% of game developers, only 30% had no fears and no worries about live service games. That is less than a third of game developers. And also, very surprisingly, it further revealed that there is now more of a shift from game developers in wanting to just have post-launch paid DLC for their game rather than having live service games. Yeah, back in the 2010s, DLC was basically everything. That was, all that you would see from multiplayer games and even single-player games. DLC was really the only post-launch thing that you would see. And funny enough, it actually seems like things are now drifting more toward DLC, seeing something like that in the future rather than just live service games. And like I said, all of this has to do with developers feeling nervous about the long-term success of live service games. Again, like I said, it seems that the risk they see is not worth the reward, or the possible reward. Which is funny because I remember in that survey about 2 months ago, a lot of game developers, even back then, felt that the risk of, non-live service games was not worth the reward, and that they almost felt more comfortable making live service games because they knew that there was a lot more post-launch content, and therefore more of a potential for post-launch profit. But now it would seem that that is actually not the case. More than half of game developers are not comfortable with live service games. They feel that there is way too much competition now, and that ultimately all the time and money they're going to spend on, post-launch updates and content may not be worth the profit that they will get. In many cases, they feel that they will actually lose money in the long run. So, very interesting. Moral of the story, we might actually see a lot more DLC drops, believe it or not, from games nowadays, instead of just the standard live service model that we have come to grow accustomed to over the last 5 or 6 years now. Live service games are a model that once seemed to be a very secure, very profitable way of doing things, but now it would seem that game developers may be thinking twice before making another live service game.